So I'm talking, and I've sort of had the idea that I kind of wanted to start speaking on some things that I think are good, might help people. And I feel like I don't know what's going to come of these recordings, so I tend to do that. I tend to put pressure on myself before I've even actually done something, you know, before something's even ready. It's like I'm already like, oh my God, but what am I going to do with it? I'm very someone who feels like I have to. I'm very careful about what I invest my time into, even if it's a small amount of time. I'm always very careful of that. And I've always been that way. But something like this, I know that, today I take a walk every day. And today I took my walk later than I usually do. I usually take my walk in the mornings, first thing in the morning. But I took it later today because I slept pretty late. I haven't been sleeping very well at all. So during my walk, I just started thinking, and I thought of this poem, and it wasn't even really a poem, I guess. It was more of just a thought that I had. But it sounded sort of poetic, this thought. So I'll read it. I'll read what I wrote in the notes in my phone. I said, in quotations, "It is much harder to see how good things could be," I said to my sister, "than to see how bad they can be. People can easily think of how bad things could go, and they completely underestimate how good they could go." And then the parentheses ended, and I wrote, "And after I gave her that advice, I asked myself, how is it that you can say such a thing and not take that piece of wisdom that so carelessly came from my mouth, and apply it to my own life?" And since I wrote that, I wrote that, and then from there I just started writing all these other poems. They just came out of me so fast, and I just wrote them down as I was walking. I typed them out on my phone, and the last one that I wrote down, I said, "The only mistake I ever made in poetry was reading it later and judging it. Judgment is the language of hell, and heaven's only language is feeling." And I wrote that, and I really thought about it for a little bit, because I've always been taught to judge myself and to judge in general. And I started to just kind of think about what judgment really means and why we do it. And there's a lot of things you could maybe blame why people judge, but I really feel like it's something that we learn to do. And I don't know, and the point of me even saying this, I guess, is to learn how to not judge has been something I'm teaching myself right now in my life. And not judging, which means not just not judging myself, but not judging anybody else, to simply judge them. No judging of anything. There's no sense in it. And the reason I started doing that wasn't to become some moral character. I don't care about how moral I seem on the outside. That doesn't matter in the end. It doesn't matter in the end. It doesn't make anybody better, what you say with your mouth. It matters what you're saying inside, of course. And if I ever do anything with these recordings one day, I would just like to quickly mention that this is sponsored by Squarespace. I'm just kidding. Wow, I made myself really laugh for no reason, but I would just like to say that I give a lot of credit to the feelings that I feel and this freedom that I feel inside and all these things that have been taught to me that have opened me and freed me. I just want to thank there's a really wise, wonderful teacher named Edward Art who makes YouTube videos, and I learned so much of what I know from him, so I don't feel it's right to not mention that. But anyway, so I was thinking about judgment, and I was thinking about, how I'm learning to not judge, and how much it's opened me to different things, how much it's opened me to do different things. Something like writing poetry. One of the things I had written down was I've always liked to write poetry, but I would judge it later and I'd throw it out, or I'd erase it, or I'd delete it because I thought it was so stupid, because I would judge it so hard. And I wrote another thing too that I just want to read some of them because, why not? But this was another one that I wrote. I said, making sure poetry makes sense makes no sense. It is like making sure life makes sense. We have senses, but what do we make of them? The secret whimsical key is to make little of them. But it is not a secret, and I can see you standing in front of me. But the difference is that I do not worry. That is the only difference between us. And that's what I meant when I said, I used to write, I've always written poetry my whole life. I've always been a writer. I've always loved writing, and I've always wrote stories, but I've always also wrote poetry and kind of thought had poems kind of just in my head, more or less in a way that they're more of a string of thought, but I always felt like maybe I should write that down. And if I did, I'd read it later and think, well, what if that doesn't make sense to somebody? Or I would judge it and I'd say, well, it sounds like I'm trying to be this, or it sounds like I'm trying to be something. And I would worry about if it made sense. And that's why I wrote, trying to make sure poetry makes sense is like trying to make sure life makes sense. We can't make sense of life. It's what we make of it, of the senses and of these things. And that's why I said, the secret whimsical key is why I said is to make little of them, meaning it's to make little of your senses. But I wrote, it's not a secret, and I can see you standing in front of me. I can see you. It's not that I don't have my senses, but the difference is that I don't worry. That is the only difference between us, because I don't try to make sense of life. I don't try to make sense of the senses. And these are thoughts that I have, and I used to judge them, and I used to think, well, that probably won't make sense to people, or I would write it down, and then later I'd be like, well, what's the point? If I can't do anything with this, if I can't make this into anything, then don't write it, then don't do it, And I would really think in those terms, and it really limited me. It limited me. I became limited in what I could do and what I could say and who I could be especially. This is another, I kind of just sat down just now and I thought, I want to speak a little bit on things, just things, nothing, just the thoughts I've been having and the things in me. I want to speak about them, and I just sat down, but then I just started talking, and I did have the thought about something I wanted to talk about a little bit, and I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about what I just said, the limitation of self, of what self can be. So of course, something like me liking to write poetry, right? And I've always liked poetry. I love Edgar Allan Poe. I love it. I love that stuff. I just do. I have several poetry books. I love poetry. I've always loved it. And I've always loved writing it. And But I would judge it, and it would limit me. It would kill it. So I'd feel it inside, I like poetry. I'd feel that. I'd feel poems in me, that I could say or I could write down, and I'm like, maybe that would be a poem that would be nice to read. And I would think that, but I would write it down, and then I'd read it, and I would impose judgments on it, or I'd even impose judgments on it while I wrote. And I would try to filter it through my judgments, and filter it through what I thought it should be. So you can do that with that, and you can also do it with yourself. And this is, again, what I mean by making sense of the senses. Don't make sense of them. Don't do that. Don't make sense of it. Is because, I've gone through, I'm just going to say, I've gone through tremendous change within me. Tremendous. It's weird to say, it's weird to talk about, because it's all things that have happened in me on the inside. But the reason that they did was because I stopped judging, and I stopped making sense. I stopped taking things for face value, taking myself for face value. I think there's a quote by Viktor Frankl as well. I hope that's how you say his name. I mean, yeah, I think it is. I can't, the video this totally just popped back in my head. It was a great video, and I wish that I had saved it. I could probably find it, but he was I don't know what he was. I don't know what his profession was, but I've seen him pop up on YouTube and stuff with philosophical or spiritual videos here and there. They've come up on my feed, but I clicked on this one, and he was explaining about this pilot's philosophy on how to land this plane somewhere. And he said, so the point that you're trying to land to is here. And he pointed to a spot, lower on the chalkboard that he was writing on. He said, that's where you're trying to land. He said, but if you fly to there, he's going to crash below that. So he said, you have to fly the plane almost as if you're aiming much higher than that spot. And then you will end up there. And then he went on to explain why he used that as a metaphor. And he said, because you see man for what he is, and you make him, I don't know if I'm repeating this the right way that he said it, but I'm repeating what I remembered. I saw the video one time. I'm just repeating what I remembered, but he said, you take a man for face value, and you make him a monster, and you take a man for what he could be, and you make him a hero, or you make him something like that. And I just thought that was a really cool way of putting it. But that just came to my mind. I just kind of wanted to put that in there. I wanted to just kind of say that, because that's what I'm talking about. And within myself, if I were to take myself for the judgments that people have put on me, which I used to. This is my point in saying this. This is what I used to do, like with my poetry or anything else. I would take the judgments people put on me, the way that they saw me, the way that they criticized me, and that became my identity. So my real self was filtered through that lens, and I was taking things for face value. I was taking myself for face value, for what I could do, who I could be, especially the who I could be. And then when I understood that that you cannot take the senses, you can't make sense of the senses, I became someone else. I completely became someone else inside. I completely changed. Completely. And I feel myself to be these great things. I feel myself to be respected no matter what I'm seeing. It doesn't matter what I'm seeing. And trust me, I definitely see some things that make me, if I were to take that for face value, I would never see myself this way. Never. Never. So I look at those things dead in the eye in front of me. I see them. So I said, I see you in the poem, but I don't worry. That's the difference between us. because I can see these people in front of me. I can see with my eyes. Which again, I want to credit Edward Art again, because he made a really, really brilliant, I don't use that word ever, but that's the only way to describe his teachings are the most they're just incredible. I could go on and on about him, but he made an incredible video called Organ Perception, and he basically talked about, if you keep following what your eyes see and your ears hear, you're always going to be desiring, you're always going to be like all these things. But I just wanted to mention that because that's what I'm kind of talking about when I say, my eyes. So I can see whatever I want with my eyes. Sorry, I mean, what I meant by that was, whatever is, and it does not matter what I'm looking at, okay? Because I don't make sense of the senses. And it caused me to be a completely different person inside. It opened me, it expanded me, it gave me everything. And that's the I worded it as, that's the secret whimsical key. That's the key to a whimsical life. I was thinking about how I like whimsical. I like that word. I like what that means, whimsical. It's like magical, but a little different, like whimsical. And I thought that's the key to a whimsical life. That is the secret key, and I actually thought of it as like an actual key, a physical key. That's the key. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say, I guess. I think that's what I have for right now. I think I want to keep doing this. I like this. I like talking about some things. I actually like reading my poems too, and talking about what they mean and stuff. Even if no one's listening right now, it doesn't matter. I don't need to worry about what it's gonna become, okay? So that's what I have for right now. I think I'm gonna do this again, and I'm just gonna do it to do it. And yeah, I have a good feeling about it though. And okay, that's it for right now.